The heavens wept the night Astaroth fell. Not gentle tears of spring rain, but torrents of celestial fire that scorched the ancient forests of Ardenmere. The fallen star, once a radiant general in the celestial armies, crashed through dimensional barriers with such violence that reality itself shuddered, leaving jagged scars across the firmament that would never fully heal. 7 centuries later, his punishment continued. Astaroth knelt in mud thick with ash and blood, his once magnificent wings now tattered remnants that dragged behind him like funeral shrouds. Around him lay the scattered remains of those who had sought to capture him, mercenaries and mystics who believed the essence of a fallen angel might fetch a handsome price in the shadow markets of Lyonesse. They had been wrong. Dead wrong. Is this all you send against me? He roared at the storm-blackened sky, his voice carrying the hollow resonance of one who had once commanded legions with a whisper. Is this my eternal sentence? To be hunted by vermin for parts like some common beast? Lightning answered, splitting the night with blue-white brilliance that illuminated his inhuman features. The obsidian eyes with pupils like shattered glass, the skin that shimmered with the faint memory of starlight, the height and terrible beauty that marked him as neither man nor angel, but something forsaken by both realms. The rain washed blood from his hands, but never his conscience. They'll send more, came a voice from the darkness. They always do. Astaroth didn't turn. He had sensed the mortal's presence long before she spoke, a flicker of warmth in a world grown cold to him. Then they will die like these did. And yet you take no pleasure in it, the woman said, stepping into the clearing. She was small by comparison, her frame wrapped in layers of leather and strange talismans, but she moved with the quiet confidence of one accustomed to walking among shadows. I've watched you for days. You kill only when forced. Do not mistake reluctance for mercy, Astaroth warned, finally turning to face her. What business has a Nephilim hunter in these woods? The woman's eyes widened slightly, the only indication of surprise at being recognized. Around her neck hung the ancient sigil of the Order of the Vigil, those sworn to maintain the boundaries between mortal and divine realms. Such hunters typically pursued the Nephilim, half-angel offspring who wreaked havoc with their inherited powers, not fallen celestials themselves. I seek something worth trading, she replied, her gaze steady despite standing before a being who could tear her apart with minimal effort. Something I believe only you can provide. Astaroth laughed, a sound like distant thunder. I possess nothing of value. The thrones made certain of that when they cast me down. That, she said, stepping closer, is where you're wrong. She extended her hand, palm up. In it lay a small crystal that pulsed with an inner light that resonated with something buried deep within Astaroth's essence. The sensation was immediate and visceral, like a phantom limb suddenly reconnected to its body. A fragment, he whispered, transfixed. A fragment of my original form. Yes. The woman closed her fingers around the crystal. 1 of 7 scattered across the realms during your fall. I've spent my life tracking them. Astaroth's eyes narrowed. Why would a mortal? My name is Alara, she interrupted, and I seek to challenge a prophecy written in the Empyrean archives, a prophecy about you. The night seemed to grow darker around them, as Alara spoke of ancient texts hidden in forgotten monasteries, of celestial conspiracies, and a war between realms that had never truly ended. According to the prophecies she had uncovered, Astaroth's fall had been orchestrated, not as punishment for rebellion as the official accounts claimed, but to prevent something far more significant. They feared what you would become, she concluded. The throne saw a future where their authority was questioned, where the rigid hierarchy of the celestial order crumbled because of a single question you were destined to ask. Astaroth stood motionless, his face betraying nothing, though the storm above intensified with his turbulent emotions. What question? That, Alara said, is what we need to discover, and why I need your help. The fallen angel studied her, this fragile mortal, with her impossible knowledge and dangerous ambitions. You speak of challenging destiny itself. Even if what you say is true, The forces aligned against such an endeavor would be astronomical. I know the risks. Something in her voice changed, revealing deeper currents of emotion. My bloodline carries the burden of the Nephilim taint. My grandfather was half angel, which makes me, she gestured vaguely, diluted but damned nonetheless. The Order took me in as a child, trained me to hunt my own kind, promised redemption through service. But I've seen their scrolls, their secret histories. There is no redemption in their system, only use and disposal. So this is revenge? Astaroth's tone carried contempt. This is justice, Ilara corrected sharply. For both of us, and perhaps for many others caught between worlds not of their making. A distant howl echoed through the forest, the hunting cries of the Order's hounds. Massive beasts bred specifically to track celestial essence. They had found the massacre and were closing in. We don't have much time, Ilara said urgently. I can lead you to the next fragment, but we must move now. Will you come with me or remain here, eternally hunted and worthless to all but those who would render you down for components? For a moment that stretched into eternity, Astaroth considered ending her there, crushing this presumptuous mortal with her dangerous ideas and partial truths. It would be simple, merciful even, given what forces she was tampering with. Instead, he extended his scarred hand, larger than her entire forearm. Lead on, daughter of two worlds. Let us see if destiny can indeed be challenged. As they vanished into the shadowed forest, neither noticed the single feather left behind, black as obsidian yet faintly luminous, like a star glimpsed through smoke. Where it touched the blood-soaked earth, tiny flowers bloomed. Impossible. Blossoms of silver and blue that should not exist in the mortal realm. The hunt had begun, not just for them, but for a truth buried beneath millennia of celestial lies. The ancient city of Noctis Labyrinthus sprawled beneath them like a carcass picked clean by crows. Once the jewel of a forgotten empire, now it served as neutral ground for beings who existed in the spaces between defined realms, creatures of twilight dealings and whispered bargains. The fragment is here? Astaroth's voice carried disbelief as they observed from a crumbling aqueduct high above the twisted streets. Not exactly, Ilara replied, her breath visible in the perpetual chill that hung over the city. But the map? It is. Held by a collector who specializes in artifacts of the divine fall. Astaroth's expression darkened. Raziel. Ilara's surprise was evident. You know him? We have history. The fallen angel's gaze swept across the cityscape. He was once heaven's archivist before his own fall. Now he hoards knowledge like a dragon hoards gold, trading secrets that can topple kingdoms or drive men to madness. Is he dangerous? A sound escaped Astaroth that might have been a laugh under different circumstances. All knowledge is dangerous, Nephilim hunter, and those who collect it are most dangerous of all. They descended into the maze of streets, where buildings leaned against each other like drunk revelers, their architecture an impossible blend of styles spanning millennia. Everywhere lurked reminders of the city's unusual denizens, doorways, tall enough for beings twice the height of humans, windows tinted to filter specific frequencies of light, harmful to certain species, and protective sigils carved into every cornerstone. Astaroth drew stairs, not for his height or the ruin of his wings, but for the simple fact that fallen angels rarely walked openly anywhere, much less in Noctis Labyrinthus. Most existed in the shadows of human awareness, manipulating from afar or disguising their true nature. Astaroth had never mastered such subtlety, or perhaps had simply refused to conceal what he was. There, Ilara pointed to a structure that resembled a library merged with a mausoleum, Raziel's emporium of forbidden knowledge. Before they could approach, a figure stepped from the shadows, tall and terrible in its beauty, with wings of midnight and gold that caught the dim light. Unlike Astaroth's tattered pinions, these were pristine, folded elegantly against a form clothed in fabrics that seemed to shift between solid and smoke. "Brother," the figure greeted, voice like honey poured over broken glass. "How extraordinary. To find you still intact, Samael. Astaroth's posture changed subtly, poised between defense and attack. Still playing courier for the thrones, I see. Samael's perfect features arranged themselves into an expression of mock hurt. I serve no one but myself these days. Much like you, though with considerably more success. His gaze slid to Ilara. And with better company. A Nephilim hunter? Really, Astaroth? Consorting with those who would eradicate your own kin? She is more than she seems, Astaroth replied calmly. They always are, Samael smiled, revealing teeth too sharp and numerous to be human. But the question remains. What business brings heaven's disgraced general and a rogue hunter to our little sanctuary of the damned? Our business is our own. Ilara stepped forward, her hand resting on the hilt of a blade sheathed at her hip, a weapon Astaroth had seen glowing with sigils of celestial binding. Spirited, Samael observed, but perhaps uninformed. You see, nothing happens in Noctis Labyrinthus without my knowledge, especially when it involves artifacts of power-changing hands. The air around them grew heavy with potential violence. Passers-by quickened their pace or retreated altogether, recognizing the gathering storm of celestial wrath. We seek only information, Astaroth said finally. From Raziel. Something shifted in Samael's demeanor. Then I bring unfortunate news. Raziel is no longer receiving visitors. What have you done? Astaroth's voice dropped to a dangerous register. Samael placed a hand over his chest in theatrical innocence. Nothing, but others who have taken great interest in your recent activities. They may have been less restrained in their inquiries. The vigil, Ilara breathed. They got here first. Indeed, the dogs of heaven's kennels arrived 3 days ago. What they sought and what they may have taken. Samael spread his hands. That I cannot say, though for the right price I might be persuaded to share what I observed. Astaroth's patience fractured. He moved with impossible speed, seizing Samael by the throat and lifting him effortlessly. I have nothing to trade, brother. Nothing but pain, which I will give freely. To Ilara's amazement, Samael laughed despite the crushing pressure on his windpipe. Still. So. Direct, he gasped. This is why you fell. Why you will always be. Nothing. With a gesture barely perceptible, Samael sent Astaroth flying backward into a stone wall with such force that the ancient masonry cracked. The fallen angel recovered instantly, his eyes blazing with internal fire, as the air between them charged with ozone and fury. Stop! Ilara stepped between them, her voice carrying an unexpected resonance that momentarily froze both celestial beings. This accomplishes nothing. She turned to Samael, who was straightening his ethereal garments with obvious annoyance. Name your price. The fallen angel's perfect face curved into a smile. A memory. One perfect, pure memory of joy from each of you, voluntarily surrendered. No, Astaroth growled. Such prices are too steep. And yet, Samael countered, so much, more valuable than anything else you possess. Think, brother. A single happy memory. Surely among the countless millennia of your existence you can spare one. Unless, his smile widened, there are none to spare. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Ilara spoke. I accept your terms. Ilara, Astaroth began. My memories are mortal and fleeting anyway, she said without looking at him. A small sacrifice for what we seek. Samael's eyes glittered with triumph. And you, brother? Will you match her courage? After a long moment, Astaroth nodded once, a sharp downward jerk of his head that seemed to physically pain him. Excellent, Samael purred. Then follow me. What remains of Raziel awaits your inspection. The interior of Raziel's sanctuary resembled the aftermath of divine warfare. Books and scrolls lay scattered and torn, ancient artifacts smashed beyond recognition. In the center of the destruction sat what appeared to be a withered husk of a being, slumped in an ornate chair. "They took his wings," Ilara whispered in horror. "And much more," Samael confirmed dispassionately. "The Vigil has developed new methods of extraction, separating knowledge from consciousness without killing the vessel. What remains is technically alive, but no longer Raziel as we knew him." Astaroth approached the figure slowly. Up close, the damage was even more apparent. Eyes blank and clouded, skin drawn tight over bones that seemed wrong somehow, as if partially dissolved from within. "Brother," he said softly, kneeling before the ruined angel. "It's Astaroth." The figure gave no indication of hearing or seeing him. "The map," Ilara pressed gently. "Did they take it?" Samael circled the chamber, trailing fingers over broken artifacts. "They took many things, but perhaps not everything they sought." Raziel was cautious, paranoid even. He would have hidden his most valuable possessions. Astaroth remained before the hollow shell of the former archivist, studying him with growing intensity. Then, almost tenderly, he placed his palm against Raziel's forehead. "What are you doing?" Ilara asked. "Looking for echoes," Astaroth murmured. "Even emptied vessels retain impressions." Minutes passed in tense silence as Astaroth remained motionless, his eyes closed in concentration. When he finally withdrew his hand, his expression was grave. "They have 3 of the fragments already," he announced. "The Vigil has been collecting them systematically, long before you began your search, Ilara." "That's impossible," she protested. "The Order keeps no records of—" "There is another faction within the Vigil," Astaroth interrupted. "One that serves more ancient masters. They call themselves the Heralds of Renewal." Samael made a soft, surprised sound. "The prophecy. They seek to prevent its fulfillment." "Or ensure it," Astaroth countered. "Raziel's memories are fragmentary, but he discovered something before they broke him. The fragments are not just pieces of my celestial form. Together they form a key." "A key to what?" Ilara demanded. "The archives of creation," Samael breathed, genuine awe replacing his usual sardonic tone. "The original blueprints of all reality, written before time was measured." Astaroth nodded, grimly. "And within them, supposedly, is the question I was meant to ask. The question that would unmake the current order of the heavens. The implications hung in the air between them, vast and terrible. If true, they were not merely challenging destiny, but the fundamental structure of creation itself." Ilara sank to her knees beside Astaroth, her face pale. "I never intended. I only sought justice for those caught between worlds." "Intentions matter little in the grand machinery of fate," Samael observed. "Now, about our payment." Before any could respond, Raziel's withered form suddenly convulsed, his back arching impossibly as his mouth opened in a silent scream. From his throat emerged not sound but light, blinding, searing light that coalesced into symbols that burned themselves into the air. "A map," Astaroth translated, shielding Ilara from the worst of the radiance. His final gift. As quickly as it began, the light faded, and Raziel collapsed, this time truly empty. What remained of his form crumbled to ash, scattering across the floor like the memory of snow. The symbols hung in the air for precious seconds before beginning to fade. With a swift motion, Ilara pulled a small crystal from her pouch and captured the dying light within it. "We have what we need," she whispered. "The next fragment lies beyond the veil of sorrows." Samael's beautiful face twisted with something between anger and reverence. "You cannot go there. The veil is death to mortals and torment to our kind. Yet go we must," Astaroth said, rising to his full height. "But first, brother, we owe you payment." The exchange of memories was both intimate and terrible. Samael drew forth from Ilara the recollection of her first dawn after escaping the Order's breeding compounds, the sensation of sunlight on her face, freedom within reach, wounds still fresh but hope finally kindled. From Astaroth, he extracted something far older, a moment before the creation of mankind when he had soared through the nascent cosmos, trailing stardust in his wake, the pure joy of flight unmarred by doubt or rebellion. As the memories transferred, Samael's eyes widened in unexpected emotion. "So much purity in such different vessels," he murmured. "Perhaps I chose my payment unwisely." With their debt settled, they prepared to leave the ruined sanctuary. At the threshold, Samael called after them, "Brother, hunter, what you seek may unmake you both." Astaroth turned, the remnants of his wings casting strange shadows. "We were unmade long ago." "Then perhaps," Samael said softly, "what awaits is not destruction, but reconstruction." The Vale of Sorrows lived up to its name, a plane between dimensions where grief took physical form, manifesting as a perpetual ashen rain that burned the skin and clouded the mind with visions of personal loss. Through this desolation, Astaroth carried Alara, her mortal form shielded, within the curve of his broken wings. There, she pointed through the gloom toward a structure that defied reason, a cathedral built upside down, its spires plunging into an abyss rather than reaching toward heaven. "The inverted sanctum," Astaroth confirmed, "built by angels who questioned too loudly yet were not cast out entirely. A prison of contemplation." Inside, they found evidence of recent violence. The vigil had indeed preceded them, but not all had survived the sanctum's guardians. Corpses of hunters lay scattered among fallen angelic sentinels, their bodies frozen in postures of mutual destruction. At the sanctum's heart, suspended in a column of inverted light, hung the fourth fragment, pulsing. With the same resonance as the one Alara carried, they couldn't retrieve it, she realized. The protective enchantments held. "These are no ordinary wards," Astaroth approached cautiously. "They require sacrifice." What kind of sacrifice? The very currency of the divine, purpose. Astaroth's expression grew distant. To claim the fragment, one must surrender their driving force, the core motivation that has shaped their existence. Alara's face paled. "For you, that would be..." "My quest for redemption," he confirmed. "The hope, however faint, of one day returning home. And for me," she whispered, "my search for belonging, for a place between worlds." The choice hung between them, impossible and cruel. Neither spoke for long moments, the weight of destiny pressing down upon them like the inverted architecture above. Finally, Astaroth stepped forward. "I will do it." "No." Alara caught his arm, her small hand barely encircling his wrist. "We need your strength for what comes next. And my quest." Her voice wavered. Perhaps it was always destined to end here, in sacrifice, of shared purpose. One by one, the fragments were stripped from them, reunited with those on the altar. Bleeding from wounds that leaked light rather than blood, Astaroth made a final, desperate lunge toward the altar. Metatron intercepted him, driving a spear of pure concept through his chest, not killing him, for fallen angels could not truly die, but pinning him in place. "It is finished," Metatron declared. "No," came Alara's voice, strangely resonant despite her mortal frame. She stood amid the carnage, her hands empty but her eyes alight with something ancient and terrible. "It is only beginning." The sacrifice at the inverted sanctum had taken more than her purpose. It had stripped away the barriers between her partial Nephilim nature and something far older and more powerful. The divine blood in her veins, diluted through generations, suddenly burned with renewed potency. "What have you done?" whispered one of the heralds. "I have become the question," Alara answered, her form beginning to shimmer with internal light. She walked forward, and none could stop her, not because of power, but because of a sudden, terrible recognition in the eyes of her opponents. Reaching the altar, she placed her hands upon the 7 fragments. They responded instantly, melding together not into a key, but into a mirror that reflected not her face, but her true essence, a pattern of divine intent that had been written into the cosmos long before her birth. The prophecy, Metatron realized too late. It was never about Astaroth asking the question. It was about him enabling the question to be asked through another. "What is the worth?" Ilara spoke, her voice carrying the weight of every soul ever caught between worlds, of a system that requires blind obedience to function. The mirror shattered, each fragment embedding itself into her flesh. Knowledge flooded her consciousness. Not just any knowledge, but the fundamental understanding of creation's blueprint. In that moment, she became both question and answer, vessel and message. The archives responded to her transformation. Shelves that had remained sealed for eternity suddenly opened, texts previously hidden revealing themselves. The hierarchy of heaven, built upon layers of need-to-know and carefully maintained ignorance, could not withstand the simple power of inquiry. "Stop this," Metatron pleaded. "You cannot comprehend what you're unleashing." "Perhaps not," Astaroth agreed, finally breaking free of his impalement. "But neither can you. That has always been the point. None of us, not even the highest throne, can fully understand the design. Yet some claimed the right to control access to it." As the archives continued to transform around them, Ilara's body began to disintegrate, the human form unable to contain the pure knowledge coursing through it. But her expression held no fear, only a profound peace. "What becomes of her?" Astaroth asked, reaching toward her dissolving form. "She becomes truth," Metatron answered, his voice heavy with the weight of revelation. "Neither angel nor human, but something new, a bridge between understanding and mystery." The light that had been Ilara expanded outward, touching each being, present with a spark of divine comprehension. In that touch was neither judgment nor absolution, but something far more precious: context. The grand design unfolded before them not as rigid hierarchy, but as intricate ecosystem, where questions were not threats, but essential components of growth. As the light faded, the fragments fell to the ground once more. 7 pieces of fallen star, no longer keys or weapons, but seeds. Where they touched the floor of the archives, new shelves began to grow, blank books opening themselves to be written upon. "What happens now?" asked one of the heralds, armor dimmed in the aftermath of revelation. "Now," Astaroth said, kneeling to collect the fragments, "we begin again. Not as masters and servants, not as worthy and worthless, but as seekers. All of us." Above them, where the ceiling of the archives had once sealed them from the highest, heavens now opened a new sky, one filled with stars unlike any seen before. And among them, brightest of all, shone a new constellation in the shape of a question mark. In the mortal realm, a child born that night would look up at this new star 16 years later and ask why it appeared different from the others. That question would begin another journey, another prophecy, another transformation. For stars, even fallen ones, are never truly worthless. They simply wait for the right moment to ignite once more, challenging destiny with their light.